Hello, and welcome to the show Writing in the Tiny House. The entire point of this podcast is to help the tormented artist by sharing what I know about writing, publishing, and stress management so that you can have the tools to produce the content that you have been eager to write. If you have the steps in place, you can produce a short story in as few as 3 months or a novel in as few as 18 months. And hopefully through the ideas in this podcast, you will have the wisdom to adjust that timeline if you need to. I am Devin Davis, the guy who lives and writes in a tiny house in northern Utah. Thank you for tuning in, and please enjoy today's episode of Writing in the Tiny House. Hello and welcome to the show. Welcome to Writing in the Tiny House. I am Devin Davis, the guy we listen to every week. So the point of this episode is to convince you all to take a vacation. Seriously though, last week I mentioned, and possibly the week before, that I am taking a break from my current writing things, at least a little bit. I'm not drafting right now. Right now, I am putting together an outline, a better outline. There are some plot stuff that I had to overlay over Tiz in order to beef out the book. And right now, I am figuring out the ins and outs of that, but at my own pace. I am not ripping my hair out. I don't have like a deadline. And I want to get a good solid outline ready, or at least the first half of one ready by the time NaNoWriMo starts. And if you all know NaNoWriMo and what that's all about, NaNoWriMo is a race, a competition of sorts, one of those friendly competitions, kind of like a marathon, where we all get together and everybody signs up. You don't have to pay to be in NaNoWriMo, you just have to sign up for it. And the whole point is to write 50,000 words throughout the month of November, which is good. That is, 2,000 words a day-ish, with a couple days off in there, which is totally possible to do. It's a really big undertaking, but I have found through my own experience that unless I am prepared with an outline that I understand quite a bit already, how you can prepare an outline and sometimes not really know what the outline's about. If the outline is good and ready, I can sit down and bust out some drafting pretty well. However, if my outline is suffering or if it's non-existent, I struggle to draft that much. Last year, I did NaNoWriMo for like a good solid 5 days. I was really excited for it. I kind of built up a team. I reached out to some other authors who have been on this show, mainly Nicholas J. Evans, and we were kind of following each other and creating a community and all that fun stuff. And then my personal life got derailed. So NaNoWriMo was derailed for me last year. I mean, I derailed myself last year. And it'll be great to sit down and tackle a new draft of Tiz, because Tiz is growing and becoming a full novel instead of just a novelette. It's likely going to have a title change and probably cover art changes too, which is fine. But we're sticking with Tiz because that's what we have right now. So the whole point of this episode, like I said earlier, is to convince you to take a vacation. It was around September of last year that I took a vacation to Hawaii. I flew out and spent a week in Hawaii with my best friend and her family, and it was the perfect experience for me. And it got me prepared and ready for a lot of different things to tackle in October and specifically in November when those preparations became, when it became time to do that. This year, I didn't spend an entire week, but I flew out to San Francisco to visit an old friend. I have a friend named Dave. He was my roommate while we were in college, and we lived together in 2 different places, and I haven't seen him in a long time, and he lives in San Francisco now, and so I flew out to spend a long weekend with him, and we did all of the touristy things. We did all, well, or at least most of the touristy things. It was a really busy weekend. We were out of the apartment all day, every day. And when we finally got into the apartment, we basically died. My feet are sore from walking everywhere, but it was great. We saw so many of the different sights of San Francisco, and it took no time at all for me to fall in love with that city. And I completely understand why there are so many people who love to visit San Francisco. I personally believe that I would like to live there, but I can't. I get to live in Utah for the next while, and that's okay too. This was part of this break from writing for me. And the thing is, preparing for a vacation like this is really, really good for the human psyche on many different levels. Preparing for a vacation gets you excited for a vacation. It gets your brain excited for something new and excited for new experiences. And then actually being there and having such a great time like I did last weekend with my friend Dave is just the perfect reset to all of the fog and all of the funk that kind of builds up in a person's mind when you get into the humdrum of your daily routine. And to shake things up, to go see something new, or to just take a break and do a staycation, just do something new, shake up the routine, is really good at resetting the creative process in your mind. I have mentioned before that once a person is done with a draft, it's important to let that draft cool off. It's important to take a step away from that draft for a while, just because when you're in it and you're writing, you are too close to it to do any good, or at least too many good edits at the end when you're done with the draft. And so it's good to take a break for a second. And a vacation is the perfect way to take a very big, important break. And while you're there, some interesting things might happen that you may not have expected before. While I was in San Francisco, I wasn't thinking very closely about this outline that I need to draft before November. I need to prepare this outline before November. I wasn't paying close attention to that because I was focused on so many different things in San Francisco. However, I was paying attention to everything around me. I was paying attention to what I felt while we were crossing the Golden Gate Bridge, just because there are bridges in Vlador. I paid attention to how things felt, to the vibes that I got when we went and visited Alcatraz. How would I describe this? What are the feelings and the impressions that I get while I am on this island with a very mixed and a very dynamic and diverse background? A very troubled background. I mean, not only was it a high security prison that was ridiculously expensive to run, but families lived on the island. These are some things that I didn't realize about Alcatraz. If you worked in the prison, your families were brought out to live on the island. And I find that odd to me, especially considering just some of the lifestyle choices that took place in the 30s and 40s when Alcatraz was in operation. I mean, raising a family next to convicts like this was news to me. And then in 1970, there was a 19-month Native American occupation from one of the tribes in California that took place on Alcatraz. And so once we stepped onto the island, there were a lot of political messages written in paint. And at first glance, it looked like graffiti, but they were political messages. They weren't graffiti. On the water tower and on the face of the Alcatraz penitentiary. And I just had to pay attention to what I was feeling, what it felt like to be in one of the cells, what it felt like to walk around with all of these other cells. To be in such a cold and unforgiving building was good research for me, oddly enough. And then again, the fort that is underneath the foot of one side of the Golden Gate Bridge. That is a point at the bay that was used for such a long time to defend the bay in a military way. And just paying attention to the architecture and what I felt there, and then to be on the boats and to hear the ocean. We went to the wave organ and sat down and had our ears filled with all of the gurgling noises of the ocean, and it was gorgeous, and all of the things. It was a really big sensory experience for me, and I paid attention to how I would phrase all of that if I were to sit down and draft it. And that's cool to be able to experience those things in such a free way, in such a not stressful, easy way, relaxing way. I mean, even though we were running all over the city, there was still so much emotional relaxation and emotional recuperation that was happening for me. Right now, work is not my best friend, and it was so good to get away from all of that so that my creative juices could start flowing again. So I ask you, my dear friends and listeners of this podcast, when was your last vacation? Where did you go? And what did you do? Did you stay home? Did you go somewhere local? Did you go somewhere across the world? And while you were there, even if it was busy, did you find time to take that emotional recuperation? Because I have been in plenty of vacations that were awful on me, that I didn't get any type of R&R. And so when was the last time that you got that? And if it has been a while, I encourage you to do that as soon as you can. Take care of yourself. Take a break from your projects when you need to, and find these cool moments to experience the world and kind of reset your creative processes. So thank you for joining me today, and be sure to tune in next week on the next episode of Writing in the Tiny House. And that is it for today. Go ahead and follow me on social media. On Instagram, I am at Author Devin Davis. On Twitter, I am at Author Devin D. And I also have an account on TikTok. Go ahead and find my information in the show notes of this episode. And remember that my short story Brigitte, which was published last fall, is available on Amazon as an ebook and on Audible as an audiobook. Go ahead and check those things out today. And be sure to join me on next week's episode of Writing in the Tiny House. Run by copy editor Chrissy Barton, Little Syllables Editing is a reliable resource for anyone looking to improve their manuscript. Chrissy does line edits, copy edits, and the final proofread for experienced writers and newbies alike. Go to littlesyllables.com and reach out to Chrissy today. A link is in the show notes.